you know, like I said, it may take a long time. It may take a lot of hours of doing this, but
Yes.
I want to get just as much as much as I can, and you know, it's not going to be any big deal. It's, like I said, I want to just get what I can when I can, and you just talk. Like I said, if you get tired, you know, you just say so,
Well,
and
I
we'll
won't
stop.
get tired.
The thing I'd like to start first. Let's go on. Let's talk about your ancestors. What you know about your ancestors. What do you know? Like your grandparents. Do you remember your grandparents?
I remember my grandfather, my grandmother. Uh, oh, my grandmother died when my father was young.
Your grandmother?
Yeah. My grandfather was married 3 times, and my father was the oldest child. He had my father had 2 sisters, old sisters. He had a half brother by the second wife, by his first stepmother, and a half brother by his other stepmother.
By the second stepmother?
Yeah.
The how old do you remember? Do you know how old your father was when your grandmother died? When your blood?
No, I don't know, but she was very small. Because I believe he was 5 or 6 years old.
What she died? Do you know?
I don't know.
How old was she?
She wasn't very old.
Did they marry real young?
I don't know what, you'd have to look in that book we got to find out how young they married, but they was young. I'd say in the early 20s.
And what was her name?
No, her first name was, I can't remember her first name. Her family name was Roberts.
What was your grandfather's first name?
My grandfather's first name was John.
That was John. That was Joseph's son. Is that right?
No, that's Joe's grandson.
That's Joseph's grandson.
Yeah.
And Joseph was the one that came over.
Well, he brought his 11 children, and the oldest one of his children is my great grandfather.
Great grandfather.
Yeah.
Which is John.
Yeah. And what was my great grandfather's name? I don't remember. I have to look it up.
And John was your grandfather, right? Yeah. Yeah, we said that. Yeah. What about on your mother's side?
On my mother's side, they came from one of the southeastern states before my mother was born. My great-grandmother lost her first husband, and her first husband disappeared after the Civil War. He went fishing and never came back.
That was after the Civil War?
After he did fight in the Civil War, and he never came back. She married again. His name was Van Kuren. She married again. Her name was, and she married a Maloney. But my grandmother was the only child from the first marriage. Then she had 3, I guess it was 2 children by the second marriage. And they were my great aunts. My mother was raised by her grandmother. My grandmother married a man named Grimes that had a large estate, and he was a widow man with 3 children. and my grandmother and he didn't live together but less than a year, because she had to take care of those children, and he was a large plantation owner, and he'd ride off and be gone for days at a time. Back in those days, you went horseback, and so he'd go and ride off, and that didn't go very well. So she went back to her mother, and when she married the second time, my mother stayed with her grandmother.
So, now wait a minute, was she married 3 times? Your grandmother?
Well, my grandmother was really married 3 times.
She was really married 3 times.
Yeah.
And the first one, the one who disappeared when he went fishing.
No, that's my great grandmother.
That was your great grandmother.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then my grandmother, I married this fellow named Grimes, owner of a large estate.
That was her first marriage.
Yeah, it was her first marriage. Well, are we ready to go?
No, they're gonna go.
Oh, I
We're
thought
gonna stay. They're gonna go wander around the mall. We'll let them wander for a while. Let's do this for a little while. Is that all right?
Hmm?
Can we stay and do this for a while? Is that all right? All right. Now let's go through this. Now this is your grandmother on your mother's side, right?
My great grandmother on my mother's side is where we started.
Right.
She raised my mother, because my grandmother married when she was 16, and she married this older man. I don't know how much older he was, but he already had 3 children, and his wife had died. And then when my grandmother married the second time, my mother stayed with her grandmother, my great grandmother, and she was raised her.
Okay. Do you know how old she was when she went and stayed with her?
Well, I guess she was born in that house, because I think my grandmother went home before her child was ever born.
She did. What part of the county? I mean, where was that? Was that Grimes
It
County?
was in Grimes County at Dobbin.
Dobbin. I don't know. I've never heard of Dobbin.
Never heard it. Well, it's still on the map.
Yeah.
It used to be a railroad stop, and it was about 3 miles from Dobbin was where they lived, and they had an old poor Sandyland farm, about all I can tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And my great uncle that lived with them, he didn't get married until he was 46 years old. So he stayed there at home, and him and my mother and his 2 sisters was there at home. But then he married, when he was 46, he married a 17-year-old girl. and they never had any children.
And when was John Vernon was your grandfather, right?
Yeah, and my great grandfather was I can't think of his name, but anyway, it's in the book. Isaac.
Mm-hmm. That sounds right.
But when my great grandfather died over here at Cameron, he was the older of the family of 11 children. Well, and then there was another child died there at Cameron, so that left my great grandmother with 9 children. And he brought them on over into Bell County somewhere. And here in Bell County, she married a man named Stovall, and he had 7 or 8 children.
So she had 15, 16
So I still haven't been able to locate just where they lived here in Bell County. Nobody seems to know I've been hunting her grave and I haven't found it, but she's buried in Bell County, and her name is Stovall. I guess I'll have to go over to Belton and look in the cemetery over there.
And that's John's mother.
Yeah, no, that's John's grandmother.
John's grandmother.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then her oldest son, they stayed here while he was afflicted with allergies, and he was hunting a place that the allergies wouldn't. He settled in several different places in Texas before he finally settled in Madisonville. Madison County is a prairie over there in East Texas.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's grown up in brush now, but in them days when they used to have brush fires, keep the brush down, it was just a large meadow, only a few trees. So he settled there because he could live there.
Get away from the trees and the pollen.
And he had a good farm there, nice large farm. I believe it was section. I'm not sure.
This was what you said, Isaac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when my father's his oldest child, and I don't know much about their, just when my grandfather married. But one time, how come my father to meet my mother, my grandfather moved to, that was in Madison County. My grandfather bought a place in Grimes County down on the creek. And my father went down there with him. Father was about grown then, and there was a neighbor to my mother's people. That first time my father saw my mother, she was 10 years old, and he told her he was going to marry her then. And it was,
You said he was about grown?
and he was 9 years older than her, so made him 19.
19 and she was 10.
Yeah, and 6 years later he did marry her. But during that time he went to the oil field. He worked in the first oil field in Texas. He worked for Howard Hughes' father. He worked on the railroad here around Cameron somewhere, when they were putting the railroad in.
Mm-hmm.
And he made enough money, saved money and made enough money that he went back there and bought a nice farm. And
And that was in Grimes County?
yeah, it was right next to my grandfather's. So
Did your grandfather still have the place there?
yeah, but my grandfather sold out soon after that and went back to Madison County. He was the type of fellow that wasn't satisfied anywhere. So he moved around a lot. He went to Palapenta County and stayed some. And he went, I don't know where else, but he still had his interest in his father's estate there in Grimes County. I mean in Madison County.
County. Was he farming all this time?
Yeah.
Your grandfather was?
Yeah, that's all there was to do then, was farm and raise cows, and
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so he sold out that little place next to my father's place in Grimes County and went back to Madison County. And I don't remember how long he stayed, but after that, in 1916, the boll weevils come in there. That's the first boll weevil. And then they ruined the cotton crop, and it was ruined forever after that. See, that cotton used to make 2 or 3 bales to the acre.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that made Texas rich, was this was a large amount of cotton they could raise. Then he went, in 1917, he went to, when grandfather moved to California.
Really?
He moved to Bakersfield, California, and bought 10 acres of land, had 1 mule and 10 acres. And he was raising long staple cotton. And he'd make 40 or 50 bales of cotton off that 10 acres with that 1 mule. But the 3rd year he's there, he died. He died, I guess, it would turn out to be cancer of the colon now.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, he died with, and then he left my great stepmother, step-grandmother there with this one son. And this one son's named Walter. And he was a musician. He played the piano. When the first movies came in, let's see, he was born in 1900, I believe, or about then. But when the first movie picture shows came in, they didn't have any music or something to take care of, so they hired a piano player to play the piano all during the show.
Wow.
And that's what he hired out to.
In Bakersfield?
In Bakersfield. He stayed in that one Paramount Theater owned by Paramount Studios all of his life. And he was a manager of it for 30-some years.
And this is your father's stepbrother, right?
Yeah, his youngest stepbrother. And I don't know whether he's still living or not. I haven't heard whether he's dead. But he would be about 70, 85 years old if he's alive.
Mm-hmm. Your grandfather, was he buried there in Bakersfield?
He's buried in Bakersfield. Yeah.
But you remember being around him?
Very little. See, when he left there, I was born in 1912, and he left there in 1917.
Yeah.
So I just remember going to his. I remember the last time, maybe the only time I remember, is before they left to go to California. We went in a wagon from our house to their house, and that was a day's journey, almost a day's journey.
Was that in Grimes County?
From Grimes County up to Madison.
Up to Madison.
Yeah, and we spent the night with them, and they were going to leave in the next few days to go to California.
How'd they go to California?
They went on a train.
On the train?
Yeah.
Why California? How'd he pick that out?
Bakersfield's a cotton country. He was a cotton farmer, so Bakersfield was a cotton country. Well, see, that's the San Joaquin Valley.
Yeah.
And the climate there is more like Texas than any other place in the world, I guess.
And that was the only family he took, was the one son?
The one son, yeah. And this one son never had any children. So that end of the family played out right there.
Right there,
Yeah.
So your father was here farming in Grimes County when that?
Yeah,
when
he had a nice little farm in Grimes County. Bowie was coming. We had about 20 acres of creek bottom land, which is black land, just like this Bell County land, and it would make good cotton or good corn. And then the rest of the about 100 acres of sand, and had some fine timber on it. Nearly every year he'd sell a few trees to the sawmill.
Were they pine or?
Yeah, they were what they call virgin pine. They was pine that had been there from the time they first. I don't know how long the pine tree has been in that part of the state, but
that, was that still close to Dobbin?
Yeah,
Still in
that's
that
close
area?
to Dobbin, yeah. It's the farm is still there and owned by Mike McCluskey, I believe. I believe McCluskey is his name. He's a Polish fella, anyway.
When your father married your mother, did he have that land? Did you already have that land?
Yeah, he bought the land before he married. So he married her when he was 25 and she was 16.
Was he already was he farming with your grandfather and then bought the land?
I don't remember. No, I don't know what he.
Is that all he ever did was farm?
Yeah,
Your father?
yeah. Well, back in those days, they had the free range. The large lumber companies owned most of that land that had timber on it.
Mm-hmm.
And you could run your cows and hogs out there on that. My father ran hogs, some other people ran cows. And he always had 10, 12 sows, and them hogs run loose out there in those woods, and they'd eat acorns.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of oak trees there too.
Mm-hmm.
Acorns and a lot of native pecans. And he'd feed them. He raised peanuts and sweet potatoes. And every night he'd feed them hogs some peanuts or sweet potatoes so they'd come home every
So
night.
they'd come home every time, so
Yeah.
we wouldn't have to go get them. Huh?
Yeah. Well, you know, if they would finally wander completely away
Mm-hmm.
if they didn't know that was their home. And the way they branded them, they cut a mark in their ear. Every person had his personal mark, and it was registered in the county like a brand is on a cow.
Mm-hmm.
So when them pigs were little, he'd cut this place in their ear so they'd know that was his hog.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1916 for the first boll weevils, 1917 made a pretty good crop. But 19 and 18 we didn't make anything. With a
Because of the
little
boll
corn.
weevil?
Huh?
Because of the boll weevil.
Boll weevil didn't make any cotton. Boll weevil, and they ate it up 19 and 18, 19 and 19. My father started out looking for a place to move to farm. So he heard about Snyder. I don't know where. Well, I guess he heard. No, I don't know. He didn't hear through my great uncle because he was on the train going to Snyder. He started talking to somebody, and they knew one of my great uncles that lived at Hernley. And my father didn't know where he lived at that time. And so they got off at Hernley, and he went out to see my great uncle, and my great uncle had about 150 acres of cotton, making a bale to the acre, and was getting 50 cents a pound for it. I mean, that's what it was worth.
Yeah.
And so my father thought, well, he'd found the place to go, so they moved out there. But it wasn't the place, because that never was. Up until they got the big tractors, the farmers never made very much out there. They were always the poor people.
Mm-hmm. So that was, did you say 1919?
Yeah. We moved out there in August 1990.
And now you were telling me the other day he kept the farm down in Grimes County.
Kept that farm down in Grimes County till I don't remember what year that was, but he he was 65 years old when he sold that farm, and he had got enough money out of that to buy that house in Clyde.
Mm-hmm. Why'd he pick Clyde?
You could write. It was like the moving to Temple for me. There was a lot of old people who moved to Clyde. You could raise all the vegetables you wanted to there, and pecans and berries and everything. So they thought, well, Clyde would be a good place to retire to.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing, watching me pick my nose.
Yep, it does. Cameras don't lie,
So he moved there to Clyde. He never was very satisfied at Clyde anyway, though.
they? Yeah.
Of course, they raised all the vegetables, but two people don't eat very many vegetables.
No, no.
And berries, they had a berry patch out there, and grapevines. Most of the grapes and berries went to waste. Nothing you could do with them but can them, and after you get so many canned, that's all you need. And
Well, where did y'all live in Hermley?
we live south of Hermley, down the Santa Fe Railroad, 4 miles.
Oh, how much land was that did he have?
We first moved there in 1919. We moved on a place that belonged to the Fire and Ranch, and it was only about 125 acres in cultivation in that particular farm, and it was bad Johnson grass. And we stayed there 4 years.
Leasing the place? Leasing the place?
Rent.
Renting it?
Yeah. So then we moved on a little better place up just a half a mile south. Belongs to a widow Bowen. It was 160 acres. We lived there 2 years, and then we moved to a place a mile north of it. It belonged to R.C. Hearn, the man that the town was named after. And it was 200 and some acres in cultivation on that. 200 acres, I believe, when we went there. 200 acres in cultivation.
So how old were you then? About 14 something?
I was 15.
15?
Yeah, when we moved there. Emery, my oldest brother, married that first year we were there, 1927.
And how old was he?
He was 19.
He was 19? I didn't realize he was that much older than you.
Yeah, he was 4 years older than
Well, he was the oldest, wasn't he?
me. Yeah, no, Ida's oldest.
Ida's the
Yeah, she's 2 years older than he is.
Oh.
She'll be 80 years old her next birthday. But my father lived to be 88.
Mm-hmm.
And if we'd have had the cardiologist at that time that we have now, he'd probably lived to be 100.
Yeah, he'd probably still be alive. So you were, when you moved to that big farm, you were working most of the time on the farm, weren't you?
Yeah. I plowed that whole 220 acres by myself with a 1-row walking buster
Mm.
on one winter. And it don't get too cold to walk behind a walking buster. Well, I had 4 mules and a walking buster, and here I went.
How long did it take you to do the 200 acres?
About 30 days.
30 days?
I could get 7 or 8 acres a day.
That's when you were 15?
No, that was later on. See,
So y'all stayed there on that 200 acres for a while, huh?
yeah, we stayed there on that we stayed there 10 years, 27 through 36,
And he rented it the whole time?
the whole time.
And then kept that place down in Grimes County?
Yeah,
Was the place in Grimes County just all paid for? Is that why he kept it?
yeah, it was paid for all the time. I guess he paid for it when he bought it, he never did tell me for sure about when he paid for that place, but he made most of his money to pay for it working in the oil field and on the railroad.
Mm-hmm. So he wasn't farming that all the time.
Not until he married,
Mm-hmm.
till he bought that place. Well, of course, he was raised on the farm, but when they was building these railroads, you could always get a job on the railroad.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember. I don't know what he did. I believe he carried cross ties, set cross ties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, the crews worked. One crew would set ties, and one crew would set the rail, and one crew would
Right.
drive the spikes and so
What he did in the oil field, you know?
on.
You know what he did in the oil field?
Yeah, he helped old man Hughes drill an oil well.
Yeah. The Hughes of Hughes tool.
It wasn't the tool he got now. But
But I mean, that was the man.
yeah, Hughes too. He worked for old man Hughes. Old man Hughes stood right there and watched him work. It took more then to run one of them rigs than it does now. And it wasn't a rotary rig. It was a sputter. You know what a sputter is?
Uh-huh.
That's one that beats a hole in the ground with water.
Oh.
I mean, you pour water in there and drop this heavy bit. The bit is generally about 12 inches in diameter and 3 feet in length, and it's solid iron. And you pick it up. This machine they've got. They first started drilling. I believe that that was a steam engine he was drilling with. This wheel that turns picks that thing up and then drops it. Picks it up and drops it. And that's the way that's a sputter rig.
If you're pumping water in and out of it at the same time?
You pour some water in there with a bucket, or did them days, and then you pulled your tool out, and they had a bucket to drop down in there and bail the water out.
Mm-hmm.
See, after they beat it up into a slush of a mud, down once this bucket was a bottom fill bucket. It had a flap in the bottom like this.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them buckets were about 6 feet long. They pull them down in there, pull that bucket out, and a couple of men push it out here over this ridge and open it up and pour the mud out and drop it back in there and pour some more water, and here they'd go again.
How big around was the hole they were digging?
The hole was generally about 16 inches. After you drop those bits so many times, they begin to spread out
Mm-hmm.
from the way. The way to remedy that, to fix them after they've spread out, is to beat them with a sledgehammer.
Mm-hmm.
Roll them. That's called dressing a bit. You hit it so many times and roll it, and hit it, and it'll finally go back to shape.
Mm-hmm. How long have you worked in the oil field?
I don't know. I don't remember. He never did tell me. I think about 2 years. It took a long time. He worked in the Sour Lake field, and it took a long time to drill a well down that way. And the reason he quit old man Hughes, they struck some gas, and there was one of the fellers that the gas overcome that. And they were getting $2 a day for working.
Mm-hmm.
This man with the gas overcome fell down, and the rest of them run off out there and looking. Old man Hughes standing there and said, "I'll give $5 for somebody to go get him."
He was just right next to the well. And he
Close
fell
enough
in.
that he couldn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a man went and got him, and he gave him this $5, And the man spent the next 30 days in the hospital, and he told me he didn't pay any of that. No, he got $5. That's what he bargained for.
Uh-huh. So that's when he quit, and so that's my.
Well, he thought that's when he saw how dangerous it was
Mm-hmm.
when they didn't have any way of handling that gas when they hit it.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. A red light blinking. I don't know why it went off like that. That didn't make any sense to me.
I don't know much
Like I
about
said, I don't know this machine that well. There might be some kind of safety in there that makes it go off like that. Okay, so so let's go back up to Hermleigh. And y'all were living, you were farming with your daddy in Hermleigh?
Yeah, and it's not Hermleigh, it's Hermleigh.
Hermleigh.
Herm. You know what Lee means pasture in German.
I didn't know.
Herm's pasture. When the railroad went through there, there was a post office 3 miles east of this place called Wheat. So they had to move up to the railroad, and a fellow named Herm and another named Harlan donated the land for the new town. Well, they also sold lots too. And I knew both of them. I knew Mr. Herman, I knew Mr. Harlan. And they were going to name it Harlan. Hermlin, yeah, but Hamlin was already established over there about 60 miles, so they couldn't, the post office department wouldn't take that name because it would be two names too close together.
Mm-hmm.
So they named it Hermleigh after Herm's pasture.
No, I didn't know that.
And we lived on Herm. Mr. Herm died the first year that we lived there. And then we rented from his widow for 2 years. And then the bank foreclosed on her, Snyder National Bank, and took the place away from her. And we rented from Snyder National Bank the rest of the time.
And that was in the 20s?
Yeah, and into the 30s. In 1935, Snyder National Bank sold the place, and we rented it from the man that bought it for 1 more year, 1936.
So how old were you then? You were 23?
Well, I was born in 1912, so 1936 I was 24 years old.
24.
Yeah. Well, in 1930, we had 200 acres of cotton, made 12 bales of cotton. So I went to San Antonio and went to work in a filling station for $10 a week, 12 hours a day, every day. And I worked down, let's see, I guess I worked there about 10 months. And in 1932, it began to rain out there, and thought I had a good crop going. In July of 1932, I went back home.
Did you go to San Antonio because Emory was down there?
It was what?
Because Emory was there? Why did you go to San Antonio?
You know, Emory went down. Emory went to San Antonio back in about 1929 or 30. He went down there in 1930, I guess, because he was trying to farm out there, and it wasn't raining, so he sold out everything for what he owed against it. He got $200 or $300 a head, and he went down to San Antonio to farm down there. And when he got down there, he found out he couldn't farm down with them people because that's altogether different. It's going to be vegetable farming, peanuts, and a little of this and a little of that. And he didn't know anything about that, so he went into town and went to work at a filling station.
It's the same place you work?
Same place, yeah. And I went down there and went to work there. And that fellow we went to work for was named Sig Moore. And that all these stations you see Sig Moore's name on them now. That's the beginning. He eventually became the largest independent retailer of gasoline in the world.
From that one station?
No, when I went to work for him, he had 11.
He had 11? Were they all there in San Antonio?
In San Antonio.
Uh-huh.
He started out in Dallas. He got his beginning in Dallas when they started to cross the Trinity River with the new big bridges that's there. I don't know whether they're the ones there now or not. But this old man he wasn't old at that time, he was younger. He had a little, what we'd call a convenience store and a little filling station right down there on the banks of the river. And they had about 3 acres of land with it. And so when the city come along, the county, to build this big bridge across the Trinity, they had to buy him out. And he sold out at a big price, got a lot of money out of it, and put a bunch of 3 or 4 filling stations in Dallas. Was doing pretty good there, and he sold them and moved to San Antonio. Well, he first moved to Corpus Christi and built up to a bunch there and sold them out and moved back into San Antonio, and that's where he started. When he got to San Antonio, he had enough money to buy anything he needed.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a smart man, but not an educated man. He had about a 3rd grade education. But at that time, back during the Depression, he was driving the best car on the market. So
you went down there and then stayed with Emory and worked?
I stayed with Emory, yeah. Well, I slept in the back room of one of them stations on an old abandoned bed, not like the homeless people stay now. And then Emory just had the 1-room apartment, or a utility apartment. And but the back end of the station where Emory worked had 2 or 3 rooms. Whoever had built it for somebody to live in. And so I slept in there and ate with Emory. And I worked there then in the spring of '32, I went down, old man Moore put in some filling stations in Rio Grande Valley. And then me and Emory both went down there. I went to Brownsville, and he went to Harlingen. And it was there at Brownsville that I quit and went home. But Emory stayed in Harlingen, I guess 2 or 3 years. I don't remember how long.
How long were you in Brownsville? Just a few months?
Yeah, I was just in Brownsville about 3 months.
And then you came back home and
Then I came back home.
helped Daddy farm?
Helped them gather the crop. When I found out they had a good crop, it wasn't quite ready to, maize was ready to start cutting. I got home in August. We started cutting maize in August. And then that fall we made cotton Made 80 bales of cotton off the 80 acres. That's all we had planted in cotton.
Were all your younger brothers at home still?
Yeah, they were all at home. See, J.W. was born in 1927, so
He was real young.
yeah. And wasn't any of them big enough to work.
Oh, it
No.
wasn't?
William really wasn't big enough to work till let's see. I guess about 34 he was big enough to do work in the field. But then he joined the Navy. He ran off from home and joined the Navy in 35 or 36. Anyway, he went down to San Antonio. He went everywhere in the world trying to get in the Navy, and they wouldn't take him until he went to one of the recruiting offices in Houston, and they took him. But he'd been to at least a dozen.
He wanted to get in bad, didn't
So he got in the Navy, and he served 17 years.
he? Uh-huh.
You can cut that thing off now.
Stop for a minute.